Okay, fantastic. Good morning, my name is Matthew Morris. My wife Shannon is behind the camera. We are hopping on and holding on here with Graham Griffith at the Citadel Private Retreat. Good morning, Graham.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's Graham Griffin, by the way.
Griffin,
Yeah,
excuse me,
there you
Graham
go.
Griffin.
All good.
The purpose of today's interview is Graham has stepped away from the corporate life and now is the owner and operator.
Mostly operator.
Operator of the Citadel Private Retreat. We're going to dive into why he chose to do this, how he's doing this, and how he's doing this as a father of two?
Yep.
Yes?
Yep.
Okay. So without further ado, Graham, if you would please, just a quick background, who you are, where you're from, and
Sure.
tell us a little bit about where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Graham. I was originally born in a town called London, Ontario, which is about 2 hours west of Toronto in the province of Ontario. When I was younger, my father moved us around a lot. He was a salesman, so that kind of ended up being bred into me. And then when I graduated high school, I kind of followed that path and moved around a lot myself. So, earliest memories were formed in the United States, but then back to London, Ontario for high school. And then from there, a year of university that I didn't finish, and then to Vancouver to try and reboot college again, which also didn't work. And then from Vancouver, I moved down to Bend, Oregon for a little stint, and from there back to Vancouver, and then from there back to London, Ontario, where I worked for Best Buy for a little while, selling warranties to people, but they thought they were buying TVs. And then from there, I moved to Red Deer, Alberta to work in the oil industry, and I worked on a service rig for a while, pulling oil out of the ground, and then I worked on a car dealership after that, because it turns out I could make just as much, if not more money, selling trucks to the guys who worked in the oil patch than being the guy who actually worked in the oil patch. So girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, came out and joined me in Alberta after the last kind of stint out to there, and from that dealership, I got headhunted for a data management company that was using car dealership data programs to figure out how to sell more cars. So I went to Vancouver and worked for them for a little while, and my wife and I at the time, we were girlfriend and boyfriend, we split up. And Vancouver was interesting, but it wasn't for me. It was supposed to be this dream where you're close to nature and you get the big city, but it was 2.5 hours out of my condo to get to the nature, and then it was a packed nature trail with people, so it didn't really work for me. So ended up going back to Red Deer, Alberta, tried to become an engineer, got back into the college gig again, got enrolled in a first-year engineering program, made it through the first semester, but flunked out of the second semester, didn't get through the calculus for the courses. And then after that, I started working for a bank in Canada, one of our big 5 banks here, and that was going to be my career. So that was 2018 that started, and I didn't make it longer. I didn't make it more than about 2 years at the bank. It just wasn't for me. It didn't feel right. It was a great job. I had great benefits. I had free banking. I would have had fantastic rates on mortgages and loans and credit cards and all the perks that come with it. A ridiculous amount of money for benefits and things like that, and everybody around me telling me like this, wow, you're good for you. You got a job at the bank now after all your stuff in the past. You're going to go ahead and this is the one. Don't lose this one. Especially my family was like, my mom especially too. She's like, you got a daughter now, and this is a really, really good job, and don't lose this job. And basically, I knew it wasn't for me. It never felt right, but I could sell things, so. I thought, well, why don't I try and get a work-from-home sales job at this point? So when my first daughter was born, the bank graciously, one of its benefits was 12 weeks of paternity leave that I think 10 of them were at full pay or something. They kind of top up the government benefits. I don't remember exactly. So daughter was born in September, but I wasn't going to take my 12 weeks off at the beginning of winter. So my plan was to basically wait until the summer, take my 12 weeks off in the summer, and then we were going to travel around with our new daughter, my wife and I, and go back to my family and things like that. COVID took off in March of 2020 of that year, and then basically I took my planned 12 weeks of leave starting I think at the beginning of July, but obviously all the travel plans disappeared. So I spent those 12 weeks getting a work from home sales job. That was my plan there. So I got that work from home sales job because I set my mind to it, and I generally get what I want if I set my mind to it and try. And did that really well, and then did that for a few months, and then this opportunity came up. So the gentleman who owns it, who I work with, his name is Matt McKeever, And he originally, this wasn't going to be a camp. His thought was he bought this and wanted to make it a community of kind of like-minded individuals who would move here and be an intentional community sort of thing. And he put out a call to adventure. And through divine providence, my wife kind of found that call, and she showed me and she talked to me about it. And I looked at her, I said, I'm not moving to northwestern Ontario, to the middle of nowhere in some old hunting camp with some guy who's trying to start a community. It was like, we're mortgage free. I've got a good work from home sales job. I've got my cars paid for. Like, why would we leave Red Deer, Alberta? I'm not going to go do it. So she kind of hung her tail between her legs and said, like, okay, fine. And then 2 weeks later, she said, well, he made a video of the place, and she had her laptop, and I'm sitting on the couch, and I was like, all right, I'll humor you, I'll watch the video. And she sends the video over, and I looked at it, and I said, well, you didn't tell me it was on a lake. So long story short, from there, basically, I interviewed him as much as he interviewed me. And I said, like, if you want people to come to your community and thing, like, I got a work from home sales job, so I have to be able to do it there. And, I got a 1-year-old daughter at this point and a wife, and I have to make sure, like, do the sewers work? Does the water work? Is it going to make it through the winter? I know where you're asking me to go is really cold. Like, do you know how to run a camp? And he answered the questions to my satisfaction. We came out in October for a week just to kind of check it out and get a lay of the land. That was October 2021. And we stayed in the cabin I live in now for the week. And then at the end of the week, we had a chat, and I said, like, I think this could work. I tested out, like, Starlink wasn't set up then, but my cell phone hotspot worked, so I could do my work from home sales job. So my thinking was, well, if it works through the winter and we can make it through there, like, I can do my work from home sales job there. Why not do it on the side of a lake in northwestern Ontario as opposed to in freezing cold Red Deer, Alberta, where there's not a lot of water and things are pretty brown and not green. Figure I can do it here, I can do it there, and if it doesn't work out, I can just move somewhere else, and it's a work from home sales job, so it'll be fine. So I came here in November with the fam, and we set that up, and then October or November, December, January, February, kind of March, April rolled around, and it became clear that the only people who were crazy enough to respond to Matt McKeever's call to adventure was really my family. And so Matt tapped me on the shoulder and said, it looks like there might not be anybody else coming to join this community, so why don't we reboot it as a tourist camp? What do you think? You seem pretty capable. He's talking to me. He's like, do you think you could help me with that? I said, sure, man. I've got my work from home sales job right now, but if you want me to work for you as a camp operator instead and try and figure out how to reboot this place and what it looks like. And so he sat down and kind of offered me a little bit of a partnership position to make it a little more, I don't know, enjoyable, I guess. That's not the word I'm looking for, but enticable, make it a little more enticing. So I took him up on his offer, and then we spent basically the last summer and the winter renovating the cabins and getting them ready for people, because the people who owned the place before us didn't really care about the aesthetics. They did care about the way the cabins could house the construction workers who worked here for 2 years, but they let the aesthetics all fall apart. So we had a contractor renovate one cabin, and I renovated a couple of the other cabins and put in new kitchens and new bathrooms and tiling floors and plumbing and a little bit of the electrical and all that kind of stuff, and figuring out how boat motors work and learning all that. And then we soft launched in the winter on Airbnb and VRBO and Hip Camp. And then this is our first real hard launch this summer right now. So that's kind of the long and short of the path of how I got here. I mean, we could spend 3 hours expanding all those stories, but I'll stop it right there, and I'll let you start another question.
That's fantastic, and I appreciate the detail. So I'll ask it in this way: what was the catalyst that led you to making such a dynamic life change?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really fit in where I've been growing up and when I've tried to do the other stuff, and nothing has ever felt correct for me. So when I'm in a Royal Bank of Canada and I'm wearing the suit or whatever it is, and I look in the mirror in the morning, and it always felt like the suit was wearing me, and every other job I was in, nothing ever really felt like I was wearing the uniform or I was wearing the suit, and it always just felt like this isn't me, this isn't long term, this isn't what I'm going to do. So for me to make the drastic change may not have seemed that drastic for me as an individual, because I've been bouncing around and hopping around my whole life and constantly making changes my whole life as it was. I was fortunate enough when I was younger to be sent to a summer camp in Northern Ontario that primarily focused on doing canoe trips. So I had a lot of experience in nature already, how to canoe, how to light fires, how to do that kind of stuff. So for me, I mean, it seems drastic from an outward appearance for people looking at me like, oh, you went from the bank to, to doing this. And then that does seem rather drastic. But from a personal standpoint, to me, it was more of a natural progression of stepping into who I who I always have been, and kind of finally finding that vibration and that energy that I aligned with, and being there and being like, oh, this makes sense. Wearing these clothes, looking like this, being here, that this actually feels like who I really am. So it was more of maybe a calling or a pull towards the energy of who I really was, as opposed to okay, I'm making this huge change, how that's going to work. And don't get me wrong, there were a lot of things we had to do. Like, we live in a 650 square foot cabin, and I've got 2 daughters, and we're planning on having 3 more children. So we're going to have to figure out how we're going to expand our living space, because we're not going to be able to fit all of us in there. But even for most people, the thought of that in that space would be just, unfathomable. And we got rid of 90% of our stuff, and we've decided that, like, we'll make it work. People have lived in small spaces before historically as human beings, so like why can't we just live in small spaces now? Do we need we never had a 4-bedroom house, but I've been in them and they never felt right. There's empty rooms 90% of the time with furniture in them, and you don't know what they're doing. So our first thing we ditched was our TV, and then we slowly ditched a lot of everything else and just have basically what we need to survive in that cabin. And that's kind of what the change was like for me. There were a lot of little things to worry about, like how far away are we from healthcare, and then that kind of changed into like, well, what can we do to make sure we don't ever really need the healthcare system, as opposed to being like, how far are we from the hospital if we need it? It's like, let's make sure we can do everything we possibly can to not even need that system. So changing our food to just eating like meat that we buy, whole pigs and cows from farmers, and being as healthy as we can, and then learning about emergency medicine as much as possible so that we don't really have to rely on the system. We don't need it. I mean, our second daughter was born in the cabin right there. It was just me and my wife. We had somebody who was supposed to come over, but they didn't make it in time, and I had done all the research leading up to it, and so we just did it ourselves right there. So like, drastic change into something that feels natural, I guess.
I've got Shannon behind the camera, just giving me that look.
Yeah, you can do it, man. Just do the research so like a list of what could go wrong and when you're gonna need intervention. But as long as you are capable and confident, you can do it.
Okay, so that leads perfectly into the next question. What are the challenges of being a dad and a husband here?
Yeah. So as a husband, it comes down to making sure that I am not only supporting my family financially, but also energetically. So there are some mornings leading up to the summer launch and getting things going, it got to a point where I get up early, it's great, the sun hits me in the face, and I kind of wake up naturally, which is waking up with the sun, by the way, is the best thing you could ever do if you find a way to do it. Like, that's how we're supposed to live. And but I get up and I leave the house, and then my daughter would probably wake up at like 9:30 or 10. She wakes up pretty late, and then my wife would send me a message, Autumn's awake, and I'd be working or whatever, and then eventually I'd swing home around lunch or something and see her, and then I'd go back to work, and then swing back home again for a visit or two, and then see her in the afternoons, the evenings, and that can get tough on a family, because it's like, the 9 to 5 I had at the bank, it turned out I was actually seeing them a bit more, but the energy wasn't as good, because I'd come home and I'd be miserable, and I'd spend 2 hours complaining about my job, and then the night, and then it would all be over. So a challenge as a husband there was like, how do I make sure that my wife gets enough of my time, that we're actually having a successful, marriage, and we're growing together, and it's not that we're these two separate islands. And because she does all of the social media stuff and all of the marketing, and she answers the VRBO and the Airbnb messages until the guests are within 24 hours of the property, and then it flips, and then I message the Airbnb messages, kind of thing, and I deal with them until they leave. And so we kind of separate it, but to make sure that as a unit we still spend time together and we still connect together is challenging when there's a lot of things that are demanding my time here right now. So really making sure that I can carve out time that we just get together, me and Aislinn, and even if that means that some of this stuff, I'm working till 1 o'clock in the morning and she's sleeping, that's fine, because she's usually sleeping then anyways. But the times that we're both awake, a challenge is definitely making sure that we get some of that time together.
That's fantastic. So you guys are in business together.
Yeah, I mean, to put it that way, there's no way I could do all of this myself. So she's just a phenomenal crusher, I guess, if you will, because she takes care of both the children right now, the 4-month-old and the 2.5-year-old, and then she also does all of the marketing for us right now, which is just Facebook stuff, Instagram stuff, creating posts, creating stories, and then any of the graphics that are around here, any of the signage that are needed. And she does a lot of the numbers things too, because although I can do it, it's not my specialty. So she'll we have a sales goals we're trying to reach every single week to make sure that the place can be a profitable business, that we can all live here long term and we can grow it. And so, she keeps track of what comes in and has a spreadsheet and puts it all together. And then if I'm selling firewood to somebody or whatever, it's my job to put that stuff in the spreadsheet. So she does a lot of that stuff at home, and then I do all the physical work. So I'm here turning over the cabins, washing all the doing all the laundry, taking all the garbage to the dump. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm either building a playground or a swing set or a chicken coop or, all the other projects that we have on the go. So as a team together, we work really, really well. So it's a challenge, though, to make sure that, like, we spend time together just for us.
No, that's awesome. And this is y'all's full-time job. Do you still have your online sales job?
No, I quit that. This is full time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no way I could do that at the same time as this.
Okay, so perfect lead in. What did you guys do, you individually, her individually, and y'all as a team, what did y'all do to prepare to come do this? You talked about selling all your stuff, getting into that mental space.
Mm-hmm. That was basically, it was, getting rid of all of our stuff was a big part of it. And we didn't have time to sell it all, so it was all just kind of given away. It was either put on the side of the street or an ad put up on Facebook that you could come get this stuff. Because, the time to sell everything on Facebook, and it's just, as anybody's tried to do it, it's a nightmare. So that was basically the big thing, was parting down all of our stuff and figuring out what we really needed and what we didn't need. And then, there was some like, logistical things we had to do. Like, I had to make sure that my Jeep, it's like a Jeep, but it's a Jeep Liberty and it's old. I had to make sure that it was going to be capable enough of towing all of our stuff here. So there's that kind of stuff, can the cars make it all the way from the 18 or 22-hour drive across the country? And, like, where are we going to sleep? And we've got kids, and what's that going to look like? Or one child at a time. Mentally preparing for it, because we thought we were going to come to a place that was going to be a community of, like, intentional, like-minded individuals, and Matt was kind of the one who was marketing that to bring people here. There wasn't a lot of thought given into, like, what's it going to be like. We're very malleable people, so it was just kind of like, let's go and we'll fit in, and if we don't fit in, we'll leave. So like, mentally speaking, on that respect, that wasn't a lot to do there. It was mostly just the logistics. And then the mental side of things we figure out. And then once we got here, it was the stuff like, okay, how far away is the grocery store? Well, there's a grocery store in town. These are all Canadian dollars, but you can imagine I make Canadian dollars, that's how it works. So, like, any kind of cottage country town is already going to be marked up. So a gallon of milk here is $8.69. 18 eggs, I think, is like $5.98 or something like that. We make our own bread, mostly for health reasons, but also because a loaf of Wonder Bread, which is just poison, by the way, is $5.69 at the store here. So then there's another store that's an hour and a half away, and that's in Kenora, and it's like a Costco, but a tiny version of a Costco called Wholesale Club. So then it's about planning on our food. Where are we going to get our food? What's that going to look like? How long is it going to take to get there? How much gas is it going to take to get there? What's our time going to look like? So those are all mental preparations we had to do to be ready for. Where's our food going to come from? Where's our electricity going to come from if the power goes out? What's that going to look like? Where are we going to put our cow that we bought? Where are we going to put our beef and our pork and that kind of stuff, and, like, how's that all going to look like? So the preparations, a lot of it were like, well, we need a deep freezer. Basically food was a big one, food and water and that kind of stuff, and how are we going to make sure those life support systems are there for us? So once we figured all that out, the rest was like, it'll fall into place because the important things are taken care of.
That's really awesome. Okay, last question, and I'll leave it open after this, but for anybody who's considering kind of shedding the bonds of corporate life, what is the most important thing that you can recommend for them to set out on that journey?
You gotta have, you gotta have support, and if you've got a family or if you've got a wife, you've got to be on the same page 100%. That's the most important thing. You gotta be able to fully trust each other with everything. You have to know that if you screw up, if you make a mistake, which you will, you can go to them and tell them, as soon as possible, and then you can work through that mistake together as a unit, as a whole. And if you have that support, the rest falls into place. The rest is easy. But without the support of somebody else and somebody you trust and you love and you care for each other, it would be tricky to just step away from that corporate world. So I guess if the question is like, what's the one thing to be ready, is if you have a partner and you're thinking of doing it, you've got to be on the same page. It can't be that your partner is just going to kind of come along for the ride and see if it works. Like, you've got to both be fully invested, and you've got to be really close and have a great relationship with each other for that to work. And you know, ours wasn't perfect before we did this, and it's not perfect now. We get in fights and things like that, but we definitely grow together, and we are definitely really strong together. Aside from that, you know, the rest of the stuff is just dollars and cents. How much money is it going to take? Can you make it through whatever the month looks like? Can you do this? Can you do that? If it's not going to work out, what's your bailout plan? You know, I don't really like planning to fail, but having no plan might be worse than planning to fail. So just making sure you've got contingencies, and that the ones that you have to care for will be cared for no matter what. Then everything else is kind of easy and falls into place. So if you're going to be thinking about it, and you know, it's not as hard as I might be making it sound. So if it's like, well, what if I give up all my benefits? You know, well, how much of those benefits are you actually using on a daily basis? You know, like, are you really using all the benefits that you're going to be losing from your corporate world? Or is the benefit of the fact that you're going to be eating better, drinking better, and waking up to the sun, you know, is that going to be your health benefits? So is maybe losing your health benefits not a big deal, because you're actually gaining the better health benefits you can? So you know, judging that kind of stuff, it's hard to give up the comforts of the corporate life, because you are taken care of, but you also don't have any freedom really, because you have to do what they say. Whereas if you move out to somewhere like this, or you have some kind of opportunity like this, the level of freedom and liberty you get increases exponentially, which then increases your mental health, which then increases your physical health. So when you're worried about losing the things that you're going to lose because you're leaving the corporate world, think more in terms of, are those things you're losing, or are those things that are keeping you entrapped somewhere that probably isn't the healthiest for you, because they seem like they're the carrot or the stick or whatever that are keeping you into something that's probably not best for you. And then when you start to look at things like that, so maybe mindset shift is the most important thing. Just think about your mindset and go to where you want to try out. You know, if you want to get away from the corporate world for a while, or you want to step out of it, like, go to whatever your plan is, and burn up your vacation days whenever you can grab them, and go to that spot or some version of that spot, and really try and feel it out and make sure it's for you. It probably will be if you're thinking of leaving the corporate world, because I don't think any of us really belong there.
Well, thank you so much.
Hey, it's been my pleasure.
As we wrap up, I want to ask, how can they get a hold of you? What is the best way to either contact you directly, communicate with the Citadel, somebody wants to come and stay, or maybe somebody wants to come and join the community? Yeah. What is the best way for them to do that?
Well, right now we're definitely operating as a private retreat center, and we picked the name Private Retreat because our cabins are all very spread out, you know, and you're not next to another people who's having a party right here. So I mean, as you can probably attest to, you're here as a couple, but there's also a family of 11 and a family of 9, and like, do you interact with them much?
We saw them just on the docks a little bit, and that was great. But when we went to bed, we didn't hear anybody.
You're separated out here. So if you want to come, which definitely, if you're going to be anywhere near the northwestern Ontario region, or if you're a commuter or a traveler, so thecitadelretreat.com, citadelretreat.com. We're also on Instagram at citadel.retreat. We're on Facebook at the Citadel Private Retreat. The easiest way to find us are those places, thecitadelretreat.com. Our cabins right now start anywhere from $109 a night up to $329 a night, depending on how big they are and how many people they can hold. We've got a camper that's air conditioned as well. We've got a glamping tent that you can stay in also, and we're just growing and building and growing and building. So as far as coming and joining the community, that plan has kind of shifted. You know, we're more of a retreat center now, where we're offering accommodations for people. So unfortunately, if you wanted to do that, you missed the window. You missed the call to adventure, and I took your job instead. So that's on you for not answering that call when you could have. But there's probably other places out there that you can go to. And something that I am considering is having somebody live here full time, maybe in a camper or a trailer for free, but then in exchange they do some work. So like somebody who wants to do landscaping all summer, you know, we've got the lawnmower, we've got the tools, we've got that kind of stuff, but that eats up a lot of my time, and I've got other things to do. So if you've got a camper or a trailer and you're interested in parking it here and you want to cut grass, there might be some opportunity for you there. So reach out to me if you want to do that, either this summer or next, or, you know, maybe even like making beds and doing laundry and living for free on this land while you do that in the summertime. That might be an opportunity for somebody to come here.
Here you go. You said answer the call to adventure. How did you find it? Was this a Facebook ad? Was it a newspaper?
So like that's why I say it's divine providence. Back in 2000 and between 2007 and 2012, when I was kind of back in London, Ontario. That's where I met my wife. We met at Best Buy together. I got a job there, hired as a Christmas seasonal employee, and she was working there, and we met there. And she knew somebody through like a high school class she was in, who was doing something like medical with his own brain and trying to like fix some problems that he had or whatever. And so he hired somebody to do a documentary for him on that. And so my girlfriend at the time knew him. And the guy who did that documentary, his name is Peter. He's on Instagram as the Hungarian Experiment. He's had a couple million views on one of his videos. He now runs the social mediation. Anyways, Peter, the Hungarian Experiment, Matt McKeever hired Peter to film Matt McKeever. Matt McKeever is the guy who owns the place here. And so then so that's kind of how like my wife, was connected to Matt McKeever, who owns the place. And Matt McKeever, you can find him on YouTube. He just started the Canadian Real Estate Channel. It used to be called the Matt McKeever Real Estate Channel. Big presence. He retired at 31 after doing, basically the real estate game. His whole story is on there. And then when he retired, that's when he said, like, I need to do something other than just live in a McMansion in suburbia. It doesn't make any sense, even though I could do that forever. And so then he started looking for something else to do. And then his idea was, well, why don't I buy a piece of property and start an intentional community? So then he put out that call to adventure. My wife had not been paying attention to him, or Peter for like close to a decade almost. And then for some reason, she saw his video about the call to adventure. And that's why I say it was divine providence. And then she was like, hey, you remember that guy who like 10 years ago, I told you he was doing real estate and you should do real estate. And I was like, my ego was like, I'm not listening to my wife about watching some guy who does real estate. Like, I'm going to the oil patch. And so I paid no attention to the Matt McKeever guy, who then knocked it out of the park in real estate in less than 10 years. And then so she shows me his thing again, and I was just like, I don't want it. I'm not going to the middle of nowhere. This guy's camp. But then we're here now. So that's kind of how that happened.
Good wife influence there.
Yeah, definitely. She's definitely a good channel of God or energy or whatever you want to call it, to divine providence to bring me here. Without her, this wouldn't have been happening. This is who I am. So
very cool. Well, thank you so very much.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very
fantastic.
much for the opportunity and for
Absolutely.
coming, and thank you for choosing to stay here.
Oh,
when
yes.
you're on Airbnb and Vrbo and you're driving across the country, there's a lot of places you could pick, and it's always an honor when somebody picks here. So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, for anybody else out there who's listening, don't forget, hop on and hold on.